A human smile. That damned human smile, even as pulse blasts vaporized his comrades into blood mist right beside him. It made no sense. Solaris stared at the young soldier's grin, unable to process the reaction, to understand how this human could look so joyful in the midst of brutal combat for survival. Private Chris Thompson sprinted through the dense tangle of massive scaled trunks and toxic brambles that made up the jungles of planet Daxam. Artillery shells whistled down from the perpetually overcast sky, violet explosions shaking the muddy ground and shredding vegetation into confetti with each impact. He had lost his squad, all 12 men, to a Daxamite ambush. His heart raced, but not from fear, from pure adrenaline, from the thrill that came with the knowledge that he alone remained to accomplish their critical sabotage mission. If he failed, thousands of human soldiers would die in the coming assault, slaughtered by the orbital defense batteries. He had to succeed, no matter the cost. Pushing his gene-modded muscles to their limits, the 19-year-old bounded over a fallen log and slid down a muddy embankment. Heavy footsteps and guttural alien shouts echoed behind him as the Daxamite platoon gave chase. Even after 7 months of brutal conflict, the aliens still hadn't learned. In the dense jungle, their technological advantages meant nothing against human speed, ferocity, and agility. Thompson grinned as he unslung his pulse rifle. Commander Solaris cursed as he lost sight of the human, the creature seeming to vanish into the tangled undergrowth. He signaled for his troops to fan out, plasma lances and scale armor gleaming in the dim light. Solaris marched into the Daxamite command center, head high despite the weight of failure on his shoulders. The structure had been hastily erected in the bombed-out remains of a human settlement, twisted metal and pulverized concrete serving as a foundation for sleek alien architecture. General Zod stood at the center of the room, his back to Solaris, as he studied a holographic display of the battlefield. "Commander Solaris reporting, sir," Solaris said, saluting sharply. Zod turned, his reptilian eyes narrowing. "I assume from your empty hands that you failed to capture the human." Solaris nodded stiffly. "Yes, General. The soldier, he evaded us in the jungle. His speed and agility were beyond anything we've seen." "And the smile?" Zod asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "He was grinning, sir. Even as we killed his comrades, he looked happy." Zod hissed in frustration. Every unit has reported the same thing. These humans laughing and singing as they fight, as if they enjoy the slaughter. It makes no sense. The general turned back to the display. Clawed hands clasped behind his back. "Our troops are unsettled. They've never faced an enemy like this, one that seems to revel in violence and death. Morale is suffering." "What are your orders, sir?" Solaris asked. "We must understand this human behavior. It's the key to breaking them." Zod fixed Solaris with a piercing stare. "You have 72 hours to bring me a live human specimen for interrogation and study. Fail, and you'll face execution for your incompetence. Am I clear?" Solaris swallowed hard. "Yes, General, I won't fail again." As he left the command center, Solaris's mind raced. He would need his best warriors, the most skilled trackers and fighters, to hunt down the smiling human. Chris Thompson, the soldier, had been called by his comrades. Solaris selected his team carefully, assembling a dozen of his most lethal subordinates. They armed themselves with the finest weapons and equipment the Daxamite military had to offer, from thermal scopes and sensor drones to portable energy shields and armor-piercing plasma rifles. Loading into a dropship, Solaris stared out the viewport at the dense jungle below. Somewhere in that tangled maze of vegetation, Chris Thompson was waiting. The hunt was on. Chris staggered into the hidden cave, pulse rifle clutched tight. The rocky walls amplified the distant thunder of artillery as he made his way deeper into the tunnel system. It opened up into a larger cavern where the remnants of his platoon had set up a temporary base. Bedrolls, ammo crates, and a portable generator were scattered about. Captain Johnson stood in the center, his weathered face illuminated by the holographic map he studied. He glanced up as Chris approached. "Private Thompson, glad you made it back. We feared the worst when your squad went dark." Chris saluted wearily. Daxamite ambush, sir. I'm the only one left. Johnson nodded grimly and gestured for the dozen gathered soldiers to circle up. Listen up. I'll keep this brief. We've lost contact with Earth. Complete radio silence for over 2 weeks now. Murmurs of unease rippled through the assembled troops. Johnson held up a hand for quiet. Until we know more, we have to assume the worst. Top brass had one final order before comms went dark. Infiltrate the Daxamite headquarters and tap into their communications network. We need intel on what's happening back home and what those scaly bastards are planning next. As the squad dispersed to check weapons and gear up, Chris pulled aside Mike, his closest friend in the unit. Mike clapped him on the shoulder, teeth flashing white against his dark skin. Glad you made it back, bro. Had me worried for a minute there. Chris shook his head. It was a close one. Those aliens were hot on my ass the whole way. And get this, I think they're freaked out by me smiling in combat. I could hear them jabbering about it as they chased me. Mike let out a booming laugh. Seriously? Man, if they think that's weird, wait until they hear about the shit humans pulled in the world wars. My grandpa used to tell me stories about soldiers cracking jokes and singing as they charged machine gun nests. I don't get it, Chris admitted. How can anyone laugh or smile in the middle of all this death? It's a coping mechanism, Mike explained. Humans have always used humor to deal with the insanity of war. It's like a big fuck you to death. If you can laugh in the face of your own mortality, the enemy can never truly break you. Chris nodded slowly, understanding, dawning. So that's why the Daxamites are so confused. They think we're insane for smiling as our buddies die around us. Exactly, Mike grinned. They've never fought an enemy like us before, one that doesn't cower or despair no matter how bad it gets. We find strength in each other, in the little moments of light amidst all the darkness. Chris felt a smile tug at his own lips, the first genuine one in weeks. Thanks, man, I needed that perspective. Mike slapped his armored chestplate. Anytime, bro, now let's gear up and show those alien bastards what happens when you piss off the human race. As they joined the others in preparing for the dangerous mission ahead, Chris felt a newfound sense of connection to the soldiers around him. They were more than comrades. They were brothers and sisters, bonded by the uniquely human spirit that refused to yield in the face of annihilation. The Daxamites had superior technology, numbers, and firepower, but they would soon learn that humanity's greatest weapon was something they could never understand or defeat, the unbreakable will to laugh in the face of death itself. Solaris crouched low, his eyes scanning the dense foliage for any sign of the humans. His team moved with practiced precision, communicating through subtle hand gestures and nods. They had been tracking the enemy squad for hours, following broken branches, faint footprints, and the occasional discarded piece of equipment. As they approached a rocky outcropping, Solaris held up a fist, signaling for his team to halt. He pointed to a cleverly concealed cave entrance, barely visible behind a curtain of vines. The Daxamites took up positions around the opening, plasma rifles at the ready. Inside the cave, Chris and his squad were making final preparations for their mission. They checked their weapons, distributed extra ammo, and reviewed the plan one last time. Captain Johnson was about to give the order to move out when a plasma bolt sizzled past his head, exploding against the cave wall. "Ambush!" Johnson yelled as more plasma fire erupted from the cave entrance. The humans dove for cover, returning fire with their pulse rifles. The air filled with the crackling of energy weapons and the smoke of burning vegetation. Chris peeked out from behind a boulder, spotting a Daxamite soldier taking aim at Mike. He squeezed the trigger and the alien dropped, a smoking hole in his chest. But then Chris saw another Daxamite, this one wearing the insignia of a lieutenant, lining up a shot on Captain Johnson. Without hesitation, Chris leapt from cover, firing his rifle as he charged forward. The lieutenant, Kal-El, turned to face the new threat, but Chris's shots found their mark. Kal-El stumbled back, a hand pressed to the wound in his side. As the battle raged around them, Chris knelt beside the fallen Daxamite. He tore open a medical kit and began applying pressure to the wound, trying to stem the flow of dark blood. Kal-El looked up at him, Confusion etched on his alien features. "Why?" Kal-El gasped, his voice weak. "Why do you try to save me after I tried to kill you?" Chris met the dying alien's gaze, a sad smile on his face. "Because even in the darkest times we must find light and hope. If we lose our compassion, our humanity, then what are we fighting for?" Kal-El's eyes widened in understanding, a flicker of respect passing over his face. Then his head lolled to the side, his body going limp. Solaris, who had witnessed the exchange from a short distance away, felt a strange sensation in his chest. He had never seen a human show mercy to an enemy, let alone try to save one. The Daxamites fought for duty and honor, but they had never considered the personal toll of war, the weight of each life taken. As plasma bolts crisscrossed the space between the two forces, Solaris found himself hesitating. He watched as the humans dragged their wounded comrades to safety, as they shouted encouragement and covered each other's retreat. They fought not just for themselves, but for each other. For the first time in his military career, Solaris began to question the purpose of the conflict. What were they truly fighting for? Was conquest and domination worth the lives lost on both sides? The humans, for all their strange behaviors and unsettling smiles, seemed to understand something that the Daxamites did not. As the firefight intensified, Solaris shook off his doubts and refocused on the mission. He had his orders, and failure was not an option. But even as he barked commands to his soldiers, a small part of him wondered if there might be another way, a path that didn't lead to endless death and destruction. Pulsefire and plasma bolts crisscrossed the cavern as Chris and his squad fought desperately to escape the ambush. Captain Johnson shouted orders over the deafening weapons fire. "Fall back! Fall back to the secondary exit!" Chris provided covering fire as his comrades retreated deeper into the tunnels. He ducked behind a boulder to reload his rifle. Solaris, spotting the isolated human, surged forward with a roar. Chris popped up to fire, but Solaris was already on him. The Daxamite commander slammed into Chris, knocking the rifle from his hands. The two enemies grappled on the ground, trading blows. Solaris's superior strength quickly overwhelmed Chris. The human found himself in a chokehold, spots dancing in his vision as Solaris cut off his air supply. "I have you now, human," Solaris growled. "You're coming with me." Chris's squad, unaware their comrade had been captured, escaped into the jungle. Solaris dragged the barely conscious Chris back to the drop ship. As the human came to, he found himself strapped to an interrogation table in the Daxamite command center. Solaris loomed over him. "You will tell me everything you know about your squad's plans and the location of your base." Solaris's voice was cold. "Or you will suffer greatly before you die." Chris coughed, tasting blood in his mouth. He looked up at Solaris and forced a grin. "Is that supposed to scare me? You Daxamites sure know how to make a guy feel welcome." Solaris backhanded him across the face. Chris spat out a tooth, still smiling through the pain. The interrogation dragged on for hours. Solaris employed every technique he knew to break the human's will. Electric shocks, simulated drowning, chemical injections that set every nerve on fire. Through it all, Chris gritted his teeth and endured, meeting every question with sarcasm or stony silence. Frustrated, Solaris slammed his fist on the table. "Why do you resist? Your defiance is meaningless. We will win this war, and your species will be eradicated or enslaved. Yet you smile and jest like it's all some grand joke." Chris laughed, the sound strained and gurgling. "You really don't get it, do you? Humans don't just roll over and die when things get tough. We've been through worse than this and come out stronger." Solaris paused. His curiosity piqued despite himself. "What do you mean? What could be worse than facing certain annihilation?" Chris shook his head. "Oh, let me tell you a story. A little history lesson for you Daxamites. See, humans have been fighting each other for thousands of years. We've had wars that killed millions. Genocide, atomic bombs, you name it. But no matter how bad it got, we never gave up." Solaris listened as Chris recounted tales of ancient battles and modern conflicts. of men charging machine gun nests and cities reduced to rubble, of prisoners enduring unimaginable horrors in camps and gulags. Through it all, a common thread emerged: the indomitable human spirit, the refusal to surrender even in the darkest of times. "That's the thing about humans," Chris said, his voice hoarse but filled with conviction. "We're not perfect. We fight, we kill, we make terrible mistakes, but we also have the capacity for great courage, compassion, and love. And that's what keeps us going, no matter the odds." Solaris sat back, his mind reeling. The human's words challenged everything he had been taught about the enemy. The Daxamites were a cloned race, each individual designed and bred for a specific purpose. Soldiers like Solaris were created to fight and die, nothing more. The concepts of free will, individuality, and the inherent value of life were utterly alien to him. "I don't understand," Solaris admitted. "You speak of choice and diversity as strengths, but the Daxamite way ensures order and efficiency. Our society functions because each of us knows our place and purpose." Chris smiled sadly. "But at what cost? You're not living, just existing. Without the freedom to choose your own path, to create and innovate and grow, you'll never reach your full potential. And that's why, in the end, humans will always find a way to win. Because we adapt, we change. We never stop striving for something better." As Solaris pondered this revelation, an idea began to form in Chris's mind. He had learned a critical weakness in the Daxamite Empire, one that could be exploited to end the war and save both their species. The key was not on the battlefield, but within the very hearts and minds of their enemy. If he could just sow the seeds of doubt and individuality among the Daxamite clones, if he could make them question their predetermined roles and long for something more, then perhaps there was a chance for peace after all. It was a desperate gambit, but one he had to take. For the sake of his squad, his species, and the future of both their civilizations. Chris's mind raced as he sat strapped to the interrogation table, his body aching from Solaris's brutal questioning. He knew he had to act fast before the Daxamite commander lost patience and resorted to more drastic measures. An idea formed, a desperate gambit that could change the course of the war. "Solaris, wait," Chris said, his voice hoarse. "I have a proposition for you." Solaris paused, his hand hovering over the control panel. "Speak quickly, human, my patience wears thin." Chris took a deep breath. "I'll make you a deal. If you help me infiltrate your communications hub and contact Earth, I'll surrender myself and my entire squad to you. We'll be your specimens, your key to understanding human behavior and ending this war." Solaris's eyes narrowed. "And why should I trust you? What's to stop you from betraying me the moment we're outside this room?" Chris met Solaris's gaze, his expression serious. "Because I'm not just fighting for myself. I'm fighting for the future of both our species. If we don't find a way to end this conflict, we'll destroy each other. And that's not a fate I'm willing to accept." Solaris hesitated, torn between his duty and the growing doubts that gnawed at his mind. He thought of Kal-El's final moments, the confusion and fear in his eyes as Chris tried to save him. He thought of the stories Chris had shared, of the resilience and adaptability of the human race. "Very well," Solaris said at last. "I will help you. But if you betray me, I will hunt you down and make you suffer in ways you cannot imagine." Chris nodded. "I understand. Now here's what we need to do." They staged a daring escape, with Solaris pretending to be overpowered by Chris. The human soldier slammed Solaris against the wall, his forearm pressed against the Daxamite's throat. Solaris gasped and struggled, making a show of resistance for the benefit of the security cameras. Chris leaned in close, his voice a whisper. "Make it look good. We need to convince them." Solaris nodded slightly, then let his body go limp. Chris dropped him to the floor and raced out of the room, sounding the alarm as he went. Chaos erupted in the command center as soldiers rushed to respond to the security breach. In the confusion, Solaris slipped away, making his way to the armory to retrieve his weapons and gear. Minutes later, he met Chris at the rendezvous point, a secluded spot in the jungle just outside the compound. Together, they made their way to the communications hub, dodging patrols and using Solaris's knowledge of the Daxamite security protocols to avoid detection. Once inside the hub, Chris rushed to the main console, his fingers flying over the controls as he tried to establish a connection with Earth. Solaris stood guard at the door, his plasma rifle at the ready. "I've got it," Chris exclaimed. "I'm through to Earth Command." He activated the view screen, his heart pounding with anticipation, but as the image resolved, his blood ran cold. The face that appeared was gaunt and haunted, the eyes hollow with despair. It was General Mitchell, the commander of Earth's defense forces. "Chris," Mitchell's voice was weak, barely audible over the static. "Is that really you?" "Yes, sir," Chris said, fighting to keep his voice steady. "We're on Daxam trying to find a way to end the war. What's happening on Earth?" Mitchell shook his head. "Earth is lost, Chris. A virus unlike anything we've ever seen. It swept through the population like wildfire, killing billions. The remnants of humanity have fled, taking to the stars in search of a new home." Chris felt the room spin around him. But what about the military, the government? There must be someone left." "You're all that's left," Mitchell said. "The soldiers on Daxam, the few ships that escaped the system. You're the last of us, Chris, the last of the human race." The screen went dark, the connection lost. Chris collapsed to the floor, his body shaking with sobs. Solaris watched, stunned by the depth of the human's grief. He knelt beside Chris, placing a hand on his shoulder. I'm sorry, I had no idea." Chris looked up at him, tears streaming down his face. "Don't you see? This is what war does. It destroys everything, leaves nothing but ashes and pain." Solaris felt a strange sensation in his chest, a tightness that he couldn't explain. He thought of his own people, of the rigid hierarchy and unquestioning obedience that defined their society. "We have to find another way," Solaris said, "a way to break the cycle, to build a future for both our species." Chris wiped his eyes, a flicker of hope returning to his face. "You mean you'll help us?" Solaris nodded. "I will. I'll help you and your squad escape Daxam, find a new purpose in the universe. We'll learn from each other, find a way to coexist." He offered Chris his hand, a gesture of friendship and alliance. Chris took it, gripping it tightly. "Thank you," Chris said. "Thank you for giving us a chance." Together, they set out into the jungle, two soldiers from opposite sides of a war, united by a common goal and a shared hope for the future. Chris and Solaris crept through the dense jungle, their senses on high alert for any signs of pursuit. The weight of their newfound alliance hung heavy in the air, a fragile thread of hope in a war that had consumed both their worlds. Chris's mind raced with the implications of Earth's fall and the daunting task of uniting the remnants of humanity with their former enemies. Solaris, his once pristine armor now scuffed and dented from the escape, scanned the surroundings with a wary eye. The betrayal of his people, the abandonment of his duty, weighed heavily on his conscience. But the human's words, the glimpse of a future beyond endless war and subjugation, drove him forward. Suddenly, the unmistakable hum of Daxamite hover tanks filled the air. General Zod's voice boomed from the lead vehicle, his fury palpable even through the distortion of the loudspeaker. "Solaris, you traitorous filth! Surrender now, and your death shall be swift." Chris and Solaris exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between them. They dove for cover, as plasma bolts scorched the earth where they had stood moments before. Chris unslung his rifle, his fingers moving instinctively to prime the weapon. Solaris activated his personal shield, the shimmering energy field encasing his body. "Looks like we've got company," Chris quipped, a hint of his old smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "You take the ones on the left, I'll take the ones on the right." Solaris nodded, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. "Just try to keep up, human." They burst from cover, their contrasting styles immediately apparent. Chris darted from tree to tree, his movements erratic and unpredictable as he fired short, controlled bursts at the advancing Daxamites. Solaris, in contrast, charged forward with a roar, his plasma rifle spitting a continuous stream of fire as he engaged the enemy head-on. The Daxamite soldiers, momentarily taken aback by the unlikely duo's ferocious assault, quickly regrouped and pressed the attack. Zod's voice cut through the chaos, urging his troops forward. "Kill the traitors! Bring me their heads!" Just as the tide of battle seemed to turn against Chris and Solaris, a hail of gunfire erupted from the jungle behind them. The human squad, alerted by the sounds of combat, had arrived to support their comrade and new ally. Captain Johnson barked orders as the humans fanned out, their weapons chewing through the Daxamite ranks. Amidst the confusion, Chris spotted a familiar figure in the enemy lines, Major Fowler, Zod's second-in-command. A fierce warrior with a reputation for ruthlessness, Fowler was a prime target for capture and interrogation. Chris signaled to Solaris, and together they fought their way towards the unsuspecting Major. In a daring move, Chris launched himself at Fowler, tackling her to the ground as Solaris provided covering fire. The two humans grappled with the Daxamite, Chris's unorthodox hand-to-hand techniques catching Fowler off guard. With a final desperate effort, Chris managed to pin Fowler down, his knee pressed against her throat. "Surrender and you won't be harmed," he growled. Fowler, her eyes wide with surprise and anger, spat a curse in her native tongue, but reluctantly raised her hands in defeat. Chris quickly bound her wrists with a length of cord, then hauled her to her feet. "Captain, we've got a prisoner," he shouted. Johnson, his face grim with determination, nodded in acknowledgement. "Fall back to the hideout, we'll regroup and plan our next move." As the humans and their Daxamite captive melted back into the jungle, Chris and Solaris shared a look of exhausted triumph. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. With Fiora in their custody and the knowledge of Earth's fate weighing heavily on their minds, they knew that the path ahead would be fraught with danger and uncertainty. But for now, as they made their way back to the relative safety of the squad's hideout, Chris and Solaris allowed themselves a moment of hope. Their unlikely partnership, forged in the heat of battle and tempered by shared loss, could be the key to ending the cycle of violence and destruction that threatened to consume both their species. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. The war between humans and Daxamites had taken an unexpected turn, and the fate of both races now hung in the balance. The squad hustled Fowler into the dimly lit central chamber of the hideout. Captain Johnson shoved her into a chair and bound her wrists with cord. He stood back, arms crossed, his face an impassive mask. "Start talking," Johnson growled, "or we'll find ways to make you." Fowler glared at him, her jaw set in defiance. "I will tell you nothing, human scum. I am a warrior of Daxam. I do not fear your threats." Johnson leaned in close, his eyes hard. "Oh, we have ways of getting information, ways that will make you beg for mercy." As the captain spoke, Mike and Lisa huddled in the corner, tending to each other's wounds from the ambush. Mike cracked a joke about the Daxamite's aim, drawing a pained chuckle from Lisa. "Always finding the bright side, aren't you?" Lisa said, wincing as Mike applied a bandage to her arm. "Hey, if I don't laugh, I'll cry, and crying won't do us any good right now." Chris watched the exchange, a faint smile playing on his lips. Even in the darkest moments, his squad found ways to keep each other going. It was one of the things that made them human. Solaris observed the interaction with a mix of curiosity and confusion. The easy banter, the genuine concern for each other's well-being, it was foreign to him. Daxamites were taught to prioritize the mission above all else, to view their comrades as disposable tools rather than individuals. He approached Faora, kneeling beside her. "Major, I know you have been trained to resist interrogation, but I ask you to consider the possibility that there may be more to life than blind obedience." Faora scoffed. "You are a traitor, Solaris, a disgrace to your people." Solaris shook his head. "No, Faora, I have seen the truth. The humans, for all their flaws, possess something we lack. They have the capacity for empathy, for connection. It gives them strength, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Fowler's eyes narrowed. Strength? They are weak, ruled by their emotions? But it is those very emotions that drive them to fight, to survive. They do not battle for glory or conquest, but for each other, for the bonds they share. Fowler fell silent, her gaze drifting to the humans. Mike was now regaling the others with an anecdote from his childhood, his hands gesturing animatedly. The squad members listened intently, their faces bright with amusement and affection. I do not understand, Fowler murmured. They are facing extinction, yet they find moments of joy, of levity. How? Solaris placed a hand on her shoulder. Because they know that every moment is precious, that life is more than just survival. It is about the connections we forge, the love we share. Fowler's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Love? It is a concept I have never been permitted to explore. Nor have I. But the humans have shown me that it is possible, even for those who have been denied it. Fowler took a shuddering breath, her resolve crumbling. I will tell you what you wish to know, but not out of fear or cowardice. I do so because I am beginning to see the truth in your words. She revealed the location of a secret facility, where Daxamites were bred and programmed, their emotions and individuality suppressed in favor of unwavering loyalty. The clones are created there, engineered to be the perfect soldiers. They know nothing of choice, of free will. Chris and Solaris exchanged a glance, a plan forming in their minds. If they could infiltrate the facility, sabotage the genetic programming. We could give them a chance, Chris said softly. A chance to be more than just weapons. Solaris nodded, a newfound determination in his eyes. A chance to learn what it means to be truly alive. Chris, Solaris and their team of defectors crept through the shadowy corridors of the cloning facility, guided by Fowler's whispered directions. The sterile white walls seemed to close in on them as they ventured deeper into the heart of the Daxamite war machine. Suddenly, a squad of genetically enhanced guards rounded the corner, their eyes glinting with cold, programmed purpose. Intruders! One of them barked, raising his plasma rifle. Chris and Solaris sprang into action, their weapons blazing. The human soldiers, their faces grim with determination, laid down covering fire as the Daxamite defectors engaged their former comrades in close combat. The clashing of metal on metal echoed through the halls as they fought, a deadly dance of strength and skill. Automated turrets emerged from hidden panels, their targeting systems locking onto the infiltrators. Chris and his team took cover, desperately trying to avoid the hail of energy bolts. Solaris, his face set in a mask of concentration, lobbed a series of grenades at the turrets, the explosions ripping through the delicate machinery. As the smoke cleared, they pushed forward, breaching the final set of doors. What they found inside made their blood run cold. Row upon row of stasis pods lined the walls, each one containing a grotesque, twisted figure. Some were almost human, their features distorted by Daxamite DNA. Others were monstrous hybrids, their bodies warped beyond recognition. "My God," Chris whispered, his face pale with horror. "What have they done?" Solaris, his eyes wide with shock and revulsion, shook his head. "I never knew. I never imagined they would go this far." Chris's shock quickly turned to rage. He strode forward, his rifle raised. "We have to destroy this place, all of it." Solaris nodded, his jaw set with grim determination. They worked quickly, setting charges on the stasis pods and the banks of genetic material. As they fought their way back out, the explosions began, the facility shuddering under the onslaught. Suddenly, a massive figure burst from the rubble, its roar shaking the very foundations of the building. It was a hybrid, its body a nightmarish fusion of human and Daxamite traits, its eyes, filled with pain and rage, fixed on Chris. "Keep going!" Chris shouted to the others. "I'll hold it off." The creature lunged, its claws tearing at Chris's armor. He fought back with everything he had, his rifle bucking in his hands as he poured fire into the monster's hide. But the hybrid was too strong, too fast. It slammed Chris against the wall, its teeth inches from his throat. With a desperate final effort, Chris jammed his rifle into the creature's mouth and pulled the trigger. The hybrid's head exploded in a spray of gore, its body toppling to the ground. Chris slumped against the wall, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Blood poured from a dozen wounds, his vision blurring at the edges. Solaris was at his side in an instant, his face etched with concern. He hauled Chris to his feet, slinging the human's arm over his shoulder. "I've got you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "We're getting out of here." As they stumbled out of the facility, the explosions reached a crescendo. The cloning facility collapsed in on itself, burying the twisted experiments and the dark secrets of the Daxamite war effort. Chris, his consciousness fading, looked up at Solaris. "Did we do it?" he mumbled. "Did we win?" Solaris, his eyes hard with determination, nodded. "We struck a blow they won't soon forget, but the war is far from over. We'll fight on, together, for the future of both our peoples." As the flames consumed the remnants of the facility, Chris and Solaris limped away, battered but unbroken. They had forged an unlikely alliance, a bond stronger than the hatred and fear that had once divided them, and with that bond they would face whatever challenges the future held, united in their cause and their newfound understanding of what it meant to be truly alive. The explosion that consumed the cloning facility sent shockwaves through the Daxamite command structure. Confusion and panic gripped the ranks as the extent of the damage became clear. General Zod, his face contorted with rage, stormed through the command center, barking orders at his subordinates. "I want every available soldier mobilized immediately," Zod roared. "We will crush these humans and their traitorous allies once and for all." As the Daxamite forces assembled, Chris struggled to his feet in the human hideout, his wounds from the hybrid battle still fresh. Captain Johnson placed a hand on his shoulder, his eyes filled with concern. "Chris, you're in no condition to fight. You need to rest, heal." Chris shook his head, a determined smile playing on his lips. "Can't do that, Captain. This is our chance to end this war, to give both our people a chance at a better future. I'm not sitting this one out." Johnson sighed, recognizing the resolve in Chris's eyes. "All right, but you stay close to me. We'll watch each other's backs." As the human squad prepared for the impending assault, Solaris gathered the Daxamite defectors, his voice filled with a new sense of purpose. "My brothers and sisters," he began, "we have seen the truth, felt the power of emotions that we were once denied. Today, we fight not just for ourselves, but for the chance to forge a new path, to break free from the chains of our past." The defectors, their eyes alight with determination, raised their weapons in a show of solidarity. They knew the battle ahead would be the most difficult they had ever faced, but they were ready to lay down their lives for the cause they now believed in. The Daxamite forces descended upon the human hideout like a tidal wave, their weapons blazing. Chris and his squad met them head-on, their rifles spitting fire into the advancing ranks. Solaris and the defectors fought alongside them, their intimate knowledge of Daxamite tactics proving invaluable. In the midst of the chaos, Chris found himself face to face with General Zod, the Daxamite leader's eyes burning with hatred. "You," Zod snarled, "you are the cause of all this. You and your pathetic human emotions, your weakness." Chris, his body battered but his spirit unbroken, smiled at Zod, a smile tinged with sadness and understanding. "You're wrong, Zod. Emotions aren't a weakness. They're what give us strength, what make us fight for something greater than ourselves. You've denied your people that power for too long." Zod let out a roar of fury and charged at Chris, his fists pounding against the human's already bruised flesh. Chris fought back with every ounce of strength he had left, his mind filled with memories of Earth, of the friends he had lost, of the future he dreamed of for both their species. In a final, desperate move, Chris managed to gain the upper hand, pinning Zod to the ground. The Daxamite leader, his face twisted with defeat, spat at Chris. "Go ahead, human, finish it." Chris, his breath coming in ragged gasps, shook his head. "No, Zod. Killing you won't solve anything. It's time for a new way, a better way." As Chris began to stand, Zod's hand moved to his armor. activating a hidden self-destruct mechanism. Chris's eyes widened in realization, but it was too late. The explosion engulfed them both, the force of the blast sending shockwaves through the battlefield. Solaris, witnessing the sacrifice of his friend and ally, let out a cry of anguish. He raced to the site of the explosion, his heart heavy with grief. As the smoke cleared, he knelt beside Chris's body, tears streaming down his face. In the days that followed, the Daxamites struggled to come to terms with their new reality. Freed from the genetic programming that had suppressed their emotions, they grappled with the weight of their actions and the pain of their losses. Solaris, his heart heavy with the loss of Chris, stepped forward to lead his people. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, that there would be challenges and setbacks, but he was determined to honor Chris's memory and forge a new path for the Daxamites. As the Daxamites began to rebuild their society, they erected a monument to Chris, the smiling human who had shown them the power of individuality and the importance of embracing one's emotions. They would never forget the sacrifices made, the lives lost, but they would move forward united in their desire for a better future. The war may have ended, but the scars it left behind would forever shape the destiny of both species, and though Chris was gone, his legacy lived on, a beacon of hope in a universe that had known too much darkness. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.